The first step of the literature review is to refine your research question to aid you in the search of the extant literature. We've already decided to look at good research questions, but now we're going to take a more focused view using step 1 in the textbook, the literature review, the big picture, using the 6 steps to writing your literature review. Just to clarify, a literature review is a written document that presents a logically argued case founded on a comprehensive understanding of the current state of knowledge about a topic of study. The case establishes a convincing thesis to answer the study's question. This comes directly as a definition from your text, the literature review, the 6 steps to success. In order to have a written document that presents a logically argued case, you must start with a good research question. And you have to be able to search the existing literature to build your argument about why that question is relevant and what is the current state of knowledge on that topic. In this 6 steps process, we've already started step 1, selecting a topic. We did that in module 1, and right now we're going to be practicing specifying and reframing and focusing our question before leading into step 2 in a moment. As you create and develop your research topic, which may change throughout the semester, there are some things that you'll want to keep in mind to transform your research question. The 3 transformations to keep in mind are specificity, focus, and vantage point. And each of these are detailed with more detail in your book. Specifically, in terms of specificity, what are the core ideas in your research question or topic? Have you clearly defined the key terms? Regarding focus, have you narrowed the study of focus to one clearly defined topic or age group? And 3, what is your vantage point? Are you going to look at the research from the vantage point as a teacher, an administrator, a psychological researcher, an educational researcher, a neuroscientist? Each of these different people or vantage points offers a different view on your research topic. So we're going to look at a few examples of transforming a research topic into one that's more specific, focused, and has a clear vantage point. For example, you could have the research question, to what degree are standardized test scores predictive of student achievement? Or, how can inference interventions improve reading comprehension? What are the key ideas in these questions? First, look at the subject, the verbs, and the objects, and then develop exact definitions for each one. For example, you could try to define what is a standardized test. What do you mean by predictive? And what is student achievement? For the second question, you could define what is an inference and define what is reading comprehension. Some of these terms may seem like they're already pretty specific. However, how a teacher defines reading comprehension is going to be different than somebody from a large corporation that creates standardized tests would define reading comprehension. And yet again, a person who studies neuroscience may define reading comprehension differently, as in terms of which areas of the brain are activated when creating inferences. It's also important to look at the focus of research questions. It's important to narrow it down to one clearly defined subject. The achievement, for example, the achievement test example could be studied from an individual, group, or organizational focus. So, do you plan to look at 4th graders, or 5th graders, or high school students, or students who are entering college? So we could change our question, and here are 3 transformations based on that question, based on those 3 different age groups, or groupings. How can a change of student behavior affect performance on an achievement test? And this would be looking at the individual. Or, how do different grade level students respond to standardized testing conditions? This is how we could look at that in terms of a group. And then we could also look at different groups and comparing them. Does unilateral district changes affect schools and classrooms differently? The third level of transformation is to look at the vantage point. A vantage point embodies the perspective of an academic discipline. And we can use the achievement test example to look at different vantage points. We could look at individual students' perspective from psychology. We could take a tribal perspective and look at cultural anthropology and see how that differs based on different cultures around the world, and historically at that as well. Then we could also look at it from a group interaction perspective, how teachers view this versus administrative perspective and how those views may differ and conflict. And then we could also bring in the parental viewpoint as well. And this would be a sociological vantage point. So here are our original questions that we had originally, trying to determine whether or not they were good research questions. So let's take two of these, or a few of these questions, and see if we can transform them. Particularly our first two. Who should teach our children, and does kindergarten lead to crime? When dissecting this question, we could see that who should teach our children lacks specificity. What do we mean by teach? Do we mean instruct? Do we mean to mentor? Do we mean to inculcate in the home setting? And what do we mean by children? Do we mean all children from birth to 18? Or do we mean school-age children? This question also lacks focus. What do we want them to teach? Are we talking about content area? Are we talking about lifestyles? What does this mean? And this question also lacks perspective for a research question. Whose perspective or vantage point do we want? The parents, administration, community, or even the student's perspective? Our second question also lacks specificity, focus, and perspective. What do we mean by lead and crime? Do we mean predict crime? And what kind of crime are we talking about? Are we talking about petty crime, ethical crime, misdemeanors, felonies? This question lacks focus. What do we mean by experience and existence? Are we talking about the experience of crime? Are we talking about the existence of crime? Or are we talking about the experience of kindergarten or the existence of kindergarten? Is this question trying to determine whether or not a student enrolled in kindergarten will lead to a life of crime? Or are we talking about the idea that maybe because kindergarten exists in a community, crime levels elevate? And then this also lacks perspective. Again, are we looking at this from the teacher's perspective, the parent's perspective, law enforcement's perspective, etc.? Using these specificity, focus, perspective, take a minute and think about it. How would you refine these questions into good research questions? Finally, let's look at one question that was a little bit better structured. Does reading comprehension ability vary by subject matter for fourth graders? This question does have some specificity because it's talking about reading comprehension ability, and it's talking about it for fourth graders. This also leads into having a clear focus that we're looking at one grade level. And we're also looking at in specific different content areas, perhaps such as science and math, which could help create even more specificity and focus. However, the vantage point in this question is missing. Oftentimes, a vantage point will not be specific or articulated in a research question. It's going to be assumed or inherent based on the publication in which it's published, or by the person who is doing the writing. These are all things to keep in mind as you're reading research. At this time, you should go ahead and go back to your original discussion post in the discussion boards and revisit your original research question. I want you to post a response to your original question. Don't revise and edit it, but post a response with a new question so that we can see how your ideas and questions have transformed in regard to specificity, focus, and vantage point. I also encourage you to post a response to a colleague or peer's post so that way you can help them transform their ideas as well. You will click on this link, on the next link, to get to the discussion board, and then click reply or quote to post your response. Also at this time, you can use this information on your revised question to submit your final version of assignment 1. Do not worry if your assignment is not completely polished. I'm going to provide feedback to you on your research question and provide you key terms that you can use for assignment 2 that will be useful in your search of the literature.